Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. I'm Josh Jones, and today's topic is how to systemize talent management for increased hiring efficiency. I'm joined by Dr. Leanna Epstein, Jody Roby, and Kirsten Greggs. Today's webinar is made possible by our friends over at Cangrade. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce a brief word from our sponsor.
Hello, glad you all joined today's webinar. I'm Kyra Russell, and I'm the Director of Sales and Business Development at Cangrade. Cangrade is an HR tech company with a focus on using AI and machine learning to curate your applicant pool to ensure that candidates with the best likelihood of success, top performance, and retention are moved seamlessly and efficiently through your company's hiring process. We do this by using our flagship pre-hire assessment to bridge the gap between a candidate's soft skills and your company's hiring needs. Our assessment measures 50 personality attributes and takes about 15 minutes to complete. Once an applicant finishes the assessment, their results can be viewed in the Cangrade dashboard alongside other candidates, and a custom report is created for each applicant highlighting their top strengths and areas for improvement. You can then take this information along with our structured interview guide to screen and interview candidates, asking the most important questions to better evaluate their likelihood of being your next top performer. The assessment, along with our structured interview guide, empowers recruiters with instant objective insights into a candidate without introducing bias into the hiring process, as our assessments and interview guide ensure no group has an advantage or disadvantage. This improved efficiency reduces the time that recruiters spend on phone screens and interviews with candidates who are not a good fit for the role. This allows recruiters more time to spend with candidates who have what it takes to be successful at your company. We learn from your organization and your performance metrics to create a profile that determines what core competencies are necessary for the role. This profile is then used to create a success model that scores all your candidates on job fit by assessing the likelihood of them becoming your next top performer. In addition to using Cangrade assessments during the pre-hire process, the comprehensive candidate report can also be used during onboarding to help new hires ramp up more quickly. Direct managers can use it as a guide for coaching new employees and develop a personal learning plan for each new hire, allowing for continuous upskilling and employee development.
There are so many ways to improve your talent acquisition and management using Cangrade solutions. For more info, please reach out to us at sales@cangrade.com.
And we're back. Today's webinar is being recorded, so by the end of the day tomorrow, you will receive an email from us that will contain a link to today's recorded content. You'll be able to watch that whenever you like, and you can forward it along to friends and family and colleagues who might have missed this really important discussion. So please feel free to share that link. So without any further ado, let's dive into this content. I'd like to kind of start off with a round of introductions. Leanna, I'll start with you. Can you just give us a quick background?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Leanna. I'm the analytics head here at Cangrade, the Chief Analytics Officer. My background is I have a doctorate in quantitative social psychology and over a decade of experience in the tech world and the nonprofit world, trying to translate data and insights into real-world solutions and actionable deliverables. I'm really excited to bring my wealth of knowledge and expertise in the land of talent management with Cangrade, where I've been working now for 7 years at this point, to try to understand how to help you hire more efficiently and effectively and bring some of the different things that we've been developing in-house in terms of research and insights that might help your growing business to succeed in this challenging hiring market.
Thank you so much. Kirsten, I'll go to you next. Can you give us a quick background of your expertise?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Greggs, founder and CEO of Trap Recruiter. Trap is an acronym for trust, relationship building, accountability, and a proactive approach. And it is the principles that guide my recruiting philosophy and practices. I've been in talent acquisition / recruiting for 22 years. Some would say I have a passion for it, but I stay because I love to bridge the gap between job seekers and employers who are interested in bringing the top talent to their organizations.
Well, you are an important voice in our community, and I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that you're on this discussion. So thank you so much for being here. Jody, can you give us
Sure. I think it's appropriate that I'm last because I kind of fill in the gaps between what everyone else was talking about. So, hi, everyone. I'm Jody Roby. I'm the SVP and leader of an organization called TalentWorks for the North American branch. We are a global business, about 80 people globally, and we describe ourselves as a talent attraction firm. So what that means in 2022 is slightly different than what it meant a couple of years ago, and it will probably be different in a few years from now. But I've been 20 plus years in marketing and recruiting, started out my background more in broadcast and television and traditional marketing, and also, like Liana, sort of transferred into how relevant this is for the HR space. So working on global employer brands, competitive analysis research, and actually outsourced recruiting. What we've found over the last 8 years that I've been with the business, and I joined as a shareholder a couple of years ago, is that it is a perfect time to experiment. I think we're going to talk about some exciting things today that we wouldn't have imagined a few years ago, even being able to track activity and brand tracking from an employer brand was something that we only kind of dreamed about when people were starting to do monster templates. So I'm really excited to be here and be part of the conversation. And I'm based in Boston.
Well, we are excited that you're here. Thank you so much for contributing your voice to this discussion. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about how to systemize talent management to increase hiring efficiency. And so one of the first things that comes to mind is, what are the possibilities here? Can we shorten the hiring process while still maintaining that level of quality and reaching the right candidates? And Leanna, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is yes. I think it's all about leveraging your resources and your people to work smarter rather than harder, figuring out what your current staff is good at and focusing them on that rather than stretching everybody so thin that they burn out. And I'm sure Kirsten can speak to this better than I can, but it's a hard time to be in the talent management space right now. There's a lot of pressure to deliver great candidates, and there's only so many hours in the day. So from our perspective at Cangrade and from my time spent in the field of talent management, just doing the research, really for what I've discovered is that there's this great potential for collaboration between humans and machines, or human-computer interaction, as it's called, where basically you can have machines, automated processes, artificial intelligence technology focused on that grunt work that humans are kind of bad at, because that's not how our brains are wired, and B, just exhausted by. Machines are great at doing things at scale, doing things in intense levels of volume. They're great as a first touch recruiting pool to really sift through the thousands of applicants potentially that you're getting for a role and tell the recruiters who to focus on and how to prioritize, and even give them some structure for how to go about having those conversations most effectively and efficiently. So you don't necessarily need more people. You just need to focus them on tasks they actually enjoy and that they're actually good at. And you need to do that intelligently. And for us, where we felt we could do the most good is by creating artificial intelligence, machine learning solutions to do that first pass of grunt work so that humans don't have to, and they can do what they're great at, which is those deep dives that machines really flounder on.
I think those are great points. Anything else to add, Kirsten or Jody?
I would just say, and you're going to hear me say this a few times, it's a very different market today to recruit. And I think that the advice I'm giving to clients every day is, I know you've done it this way, but we might need to look at doing something differently. So I think to, sort of answer your question, it is all about streamlining. I think Liana spoke to it. People are really tired. They're stretched. Even if they're working in a more flexible environment, they're working a longer day. It's harder to walk away. And people have real jobs outside of helping recruit for the business, especially if they're having some response from the Great Resignation and they're already doing someone else's job, never mind trying to be a full-time recruiter. So I think it is just taking a pause and really saying, okay, I know in the past we've done these 5 steps, and maybe this person met with this person and a candidate has to meet these 2 people. And that's a lot of the coaching. And I'm sure, Kristen's going to agree. It is about it's not what you used to do. It's what's really relevant, because speed is most important today. I've never seen the market so tight that if you are lucky enough to be engaging with a good candidate, they are not going to go through 3 or 4 rounds, 3 or 4 weeks of interviews. So you have to take advantage of technology. You have to take advantage of being able to trust your people, that not everybody needs to meet everybody at every phase.
Totally agree. For me, coming from the person who is actively working as a recruiter right now, filling roles, there's got to be an acknowledgement of where the actual bottlenecks are in the process. And right now, it's in the interview phase, and people are too slow to make decisions because we're still leaning on these arbitrary rules about the processes. This what some have coined, a former boss of mine coined, the self-imposed governance. Who said we have to interview 3 people? Who said that 8 people have to get in front of this person and we have to figure out schedules and all of those things? And we really have to lean on what that really means, like what it really means to interview 3 people with 4 hiring managers. For the hiring manager, they're only seeing 3 people. For the recruiter, for the coordinator, for the HR person who may be involved in that, for anybody who may be involved in the process, for those 3 people, we also have to deal with all the other folks who are a part of the hiring life cycle. And it's very difficult to manage that many human beings at one time for one position when you have multiple positions. I know recruiters right now who have, and I'm not even talking about the high volume folks who are repetitively filling, 100 openings in the same type of bucket. But I know people that have, 20 and 30 unique positions. And that is that's a lot. Like I said, when you start thinking about the numbers and when you start thinking about why your hiring process is as long as it is, and it's because we're still leaning on those arbitrary things. Like, this is how long the hiring process is supposed to be. Like, it takes us 35 days to hire. So does it? It doesn't have to. So we need to start turning off those old ideas about what it means to be entrenched in the hiring process.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that a little bit, I think something you touched on is something that's really critical from my perspective, which is just the idea that you need to have objective standards of what a good hire looks like. What is it that you're looking for? Because you don't just need 8 people and then you pick the best one of the 8. That doesn't really make any sense. You should just have a sense of what a good candidate looks like. But to do that, that takes work, that takes planning internally. So that takes folks circling up internally to define what a successful candidate looks like. What are the hard skills that are absolutely essential? And what hard skills can they learn on the job? Again, that's why we chose to focus on this soft skill lens too, because then you can bring people through for more than one role simultaneously if there's not, a hard skill disqualifier necessarily, especially for some of the high volume roles that folks are hiring for right now. So I think it's really critical to define what success looks like, not just for post-hire. That gets talked about a lot post-hire, right? You need to know what success looks like so that if you hire the right person after them, you make the hire. I think what you bring up is really important for understanding how that's impactful pre-hire as well. You really need to understand what a good candidate looks like, or you won't know when you find one because maybe you only have 1 and not 8. And you let them slip through your fingers because you didn't realize just how good they are until you let the job ad sit open for another 5 months and can't find anyone.
Oh God, I just got triggered.
Sorry. Put the trigger warning on it when you post it, Josh.
You said another 5 months. I'm like, oh my God. That's, and if you had said that a year ago, people would be like, oh, you're crazy. And no, that's reality. Yeah. That's reality right now.
It's unfortunate that so many hiring managers are not really sure what they're looking for. I think as recruiters, we've all been in that situation of, I'll know it when I see it, or you're presenting candidates in order to get an idea of what the hiring manager wants. You're literally making submittals as you're trying to figure out what the heck they want to see. And you mentioned, working, Kirsten, 20 or 30 unique recs. And I want to talk about this later. I don't want to talk about candidate experience just yet, but I would argue that if you're working that many unique recs and you've got that many hiring managers involved, and there's all these steps in the process, and maybe you're dealing with an archaic philosophy of this is how we've always done it, you're creating a miserable experience for everybody involved. And so I think something that needs to be focused on for a lot of teams is a willingness to look at things differently, and a willingness to make changes. And that kind of brings me to the next question, because I think technology brings a lot of solutions to this. And so how do we look at technology? What is the role that it plays in improving time to hire and efficiency and things like that? And then I want to add a side question to that. As we look at these technologies, how do we know when to implement new technology, and how do we know when to walk away from existing technology, right? How do we answer these questions? I'd like to start with you, Kirsten, on this one.
So how do we know when to implement new technologies? When like Liana said, when there's a need to take some of the administrative, some of the repetitive tasks off of the frontline recruiters, that's when you need to do that. But you need to do that in collaboration with the recruiters. You need to, Oh, it looked like someone left the room and came back. Sorry about that. Okay, where was I? That threw me totally off. Okay, you need to do that with the recruiters. A lot of times, especially during implementations, when I worked in corporate exclusively, the end of my career was in operations. And the thing that set me apart from my peers and from other folks who were in what was then becoming TA Ops was that I had been a recruiter, and I engaged our systems like a recruiter. I didn't engage our systems on like a how-to type of thing. Like certain things were intuitive to me, certain things were important to me, and certain things were not. Certain things were just extra. Certain things were not necessary for me to get the end result that I was looking for, or to solve for the problem that we were trying to attack. So I think a lot of times when we implement technology, and we've all made mistakes. I mean, how many of us have not made mistakes with the ATS that we selected? Because it was the new hot thing. It had all the bells and whistles, but then you realize that you have to call 18 other companies to add on to all of the things that it said it was going to do, but it actually doesn't, because again, someone who wasn't a recruiter sold you on it, and no one that was a recruiter was in the room when the decision was made. So when do you get rid of it? When it's not working. When it's not working, and when your recruiters aren't utilizing it. Again, you could have all the tools in the world, but if you really look at utilization, I think you'll find there are some tools that recruiters use more than others, or there are some tools that some recruiters use more than others. And look at who has, who's meeting their KPIs. Look at who's meeting their goals and objectives, and which ones of those tools they're most heavily leaning on to make their job more efficient and more effective.
I like it. Anything to add, Jody or Leanna?
Yeah, I think one of the things that gets sort of forgotten in that scenario, right? So you're looking at technology, and you're looking at the ease of, hey, this is going to be great. Our hiring managers can get in and actually review clients and be able to make comments, and then you get the reality that no one's touching it except your top recruiters. And so I think when you're making those decisions, somebody also needs to look at what's that experience from the candidate perspective, because I think sometimes that's left out to the end. It's like, does the price point fit? Is it the bells and whistles that we're looking for? And then at the end of the day, it's almost like, oh yeah, how will this be if someone actually is applying? And that's where looking at things like, can you actually update and have some branding, so you can not only just give the job requirements, but actually showcase a little bit about your culture. You know, a good recruiting strategy is going to include as much about what we want to say about what we're looking for candidates, but candidates should be able to have some sense of employer brand and culture to say, oh, this looks like a cool place I want to work, or everybody's in a suit in these photos, which are stock photography that they can't change. I'm not interested. And someone's making a judgment that has nothing to do with the reality. So I think there's a lot of movement here, but that's one of the things I would give advice to, is just whoever's in those decisions, and it might be procurement, it might be ops, it might be someone who's not touching, find out where can we actually put our sort of brand essence on there, so that whatever templates we're left with, it can feel like us as a company.
Yeah, and I would just echo both what Jody and Kirsten said in terms of, don't just accept that the way you've done things is the way you have to do things. I think the clients that we work with that see the most success on diversifying their hiring funnel, on increasing the volume in their hiring funnel, even during this sort of challenging hiring climate, are ones that are willing to get creative and try different things, to iterate things until they find the right solution that works for them. And there's so many different things that Jody listed out and Kirsten listed out that you could try. And it's about being willing to walk away from technology that's not working for you. And by being a really educated consumer of that technology, don't just assume that, the folks that are selling you whatever they're selling you are going to actually be able to deliver on what they're promising you. So really press them on it, and consider the ease of adoption and all those kinds of things, because those real world concerns for your recruiting team are really important. And you want tools that make their lives easier rather than harder. And like Jody's saying, you want tools that make the candidate's life easier rather than harder, because if you're losing candidates, if your candidates are dropping off in the funnel due to some silly thing that you can change, like a picture on your website, or, a description of your job, or just running your job description through one of many free online tools that checks for gender bias, for example. If you're losing candidates for reasons that aren't essential to your job, by all means, try to iterate on that and do some deep dive into that before you're putting it up. Don't just accept the sort of squeaky wheel as, the status quo you can't change, I would say.
Yeah, I'm just looking at one of the questions and comments, and someone's saying they just went through this with one of the big companies out there beginning with a W. So I think all is not lost, I would say. If you're in that situation, you're like, oh my God, I just took this new job and they promised a system and it's not what I expected, or we can't do X, Y, and Z. The good news is the open market of technology to bolt on and to be able to sort of adjust from system to system is really becoming much less cost prohibitive than it used to be. So even small systems, there's ways that you can work around. A lot of what we do as a digital attraction agency is that we need to help a company hire quickly. Even companies like Moderna, who you would think like, oh, everyone's flocking there, but they have so much volume and they need to get the word out. So it would have taken way too long to go through an ATS upgrade and building out, getting access to a website that they're trying to save lives on the COVID vaccine on their website. They're not worried about the recruitment channels. So I think being open and being able to start to build a dialogue with your internal IT and ops and say, look, here's something we need to do. We need to do this to hire IT folks. We need to stand up a landing page with a light apply. We need to be able to then convert this into the ATS. And this is going to be a 6-month pilot. And we're going to use programmatic media that you don't have to touch, marketing team, but you can approve. So I do feel that the market is forcing organizations who maybe in the past would have said no to say yes, because they don't have capacity either. And it's not as scary as it used to be to leverage technology. There's analytics, there's protection, and I think good organizations can find good partners to do that safely and not have to worry about reinventing the wheel, even if they're working with a system that may not be exactly what they thought they were getting.
Absolutely. And I think, Jody, something you touched on as well that's critical is giving that room for voice inside the organization for employees that are having pain points. So if you're having a problem with an ATS, which shall not be named, then, being able to escalate that, being able to describe the pain point. So it's not just directed at a product necessarily, but exploring what the pain point is and how you can work to solve that as a company. Because if you're having it as one recruiter, it's not just you, right? Other people are probably also bumping up against the same problem. So I think it's just really critical for the company to give space for the voices of recruiters and everyone in general to be able to escalate problems. And that feeds into some of this burnout and resignation, right? Within the HR spaces, that they're not being heard. These problems aren't able to be escalated.
If somebody asked me what are the benefits of implementing new technology, one of my immediate answers would be probably time to fill, probably cost per hire, things like that. Leanna, can you tell us any other fruits of that tree, right? Like, what are some other benefits of implementing the right technology in the right way? Something that I may have forgotten or missed.
I think something that's really important with implementing the right technology, if we're talking about pre-hire, besides time to fill and cost per hire, is the pool that you're working with. So depending on how you're pre-screening your candidates before the recruiter first touch, you may be unnecessarily cutting out a really large chunk of your funnel that may be potential superstars for your organization, and you're missing them, again, sort of what Jody was saying, for silly reasons. Maybe you're missing them because they have a resume gap and you're using a resume screener and it discriminates against folks who have a resume gap. Maybe you're using it because you have a resume screener and it's screening for keywords and they come from an underrepresented background and they don't know what keywords to put in their resume. Maybe you're missing them because you're focusing exclusively on hard skills and on the depth and number of years of their hard skills. You see these posts all the time where technology hasn't even been around for 10 years and they want 12 years of experience, right? Like, everyone's missing
20-year Facebook expert, yes.
Exactly. Where you're saying, as a disqualifying question on LinkedIn, can you start right away? They say no, and LinkedIn screens them out. Well, maybe you can wait for a month, because otherwise you're waiting 3 months for someone who can start immediately, and that just doesn't make sense. So making sure that you pick the right first touch technology is critical. And again, you'll hear me come back to soft skills again and again, because I think it's the great equalizer from my perspective as a psychologist in terms of making sure that you're getting promising folks through the funnel to talk to real human beings. And I think if you talk to anyone who's looked for a job in the past, I don't know, century or so, that one of the hardest things is to get out of that pile, right? If you don't know someone, if you don't know what keywords to put on, if you don't have a really linear job progression, you're hard pressed to get that first interview. And once you get that first interview, even if you're more of a non-traditional candidate, you really feel like you have a shot. But getting out of that pile is hard. And so you really want to try to implement first touch technology that grabs the right people out of that pile and is grabbing folks that maybe other companies in your space are missing, because those are the gems and those are the folks that are going to stay with you and you won't turn over, and they, you won't have to worry about replacing them 6 months down the road because they churn. So from my perspective, Josh, I think that sort of funnel volume, funnel diversity is an overlooked, really critical aspect that technology has to offer. And also, once you get the right folks in the job, they're going to be happier and they're going to be more productive. So you really just want to do everything you can to make that happen.
I'm sorry about that.
Retention. So it kind of, I would assume it would help with retention, but go ahead, Kristen.
I was saying that I've always been an advocate for a high touch and a high tech equal situation. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that we make from the TA perspective is that we are constantly looking for technology to replace something that a human should be doing. Not, yes, that like Leanna brought up early on, these are the things that her tool does to allow for the human to have more meaningful human interaction with the right people who will, ultimately get hired, stay with the company for as long as necessary to keep them out of the hiring funnel, to keep them from being to succumbing to the Great Resignation, or even the Great Reshuffle, not leaving the industry completely, but, just leaving your company, going to your competitor, this bouncing back and forth. So when we think about that, we've got to not think about it like, do this job of a recruiter. Like there's been this fear, for a very long time. And I think it's been a misnomer that, machines are replacing recruiters, because there's this misunderstanding of how complex and frankly, I'm not a scientist, but recruiting is scientific. Like there's a methodology. There is a great deal of thought. There is a great deal of things that you might not be able to pinpoint. Like you might not be able to roadmap every single step in the recruiting process. Like your map would be enormous. It just wouldn't make sense to anybody who has not done that job. So I do think we need to stop trying to use technology, as great as it is, to replace the things that a human being really should be doing. And recruiters also have to realize, like, you're not going away. Like you are important. And anyone who has this idea that, oh, we need this because we don't need the recruiters to do that, because anybody can be a recruiter. The hiring managers are, well, if this is screening, then we don't need the recruiters because all they do is screen. Well, if this is the onboarding tool, then we don't need onboarders, or we don't need coordinators, because they can schedule interviews and they can set up orientation, and we can just have somebody fill out a form, and that will get them their equipment and things like that. Okay. So as long as we're not thinking about technology as a way to replace a human being, I think we're on the right path.
Josh, I've seen a couple of questions pop up about, like, how do you get the word across to leadership? If you don't mind, I'll take that to start.
I want to hop on those, and I just want to let everybody in the audience know that there's actually two tabs. There's a chat tab and there's a Q&A tab. And so if you can try to keep your questions on the Q&A tab, we'll probably be able to get to them more effectively. And then if you're kind of talking amongst yourselves, or if you've got commentary, the chat tab is a really good place for that. But go ahead.
So I think the best way to get leadership to listen is the P word, and I will say pilot. For some reason, the word pilot gives people a little bit more confidence. You're not signing away your life of a 10-year ATS system, or some of the contracts that we used to have. It used to be remember the days of a 3-year monster deal, like, can you imagine doing something in, 3 years now for contract? It's like 3 months seems like a lifetime in the cycle. So do your research, look at some options, and, forums like this, and, look at the chat, even look at like Quora, Google. You'll see other folks have gone through, like, hey, what's the workaround for such and such? I'm using Workday, I'm using such and such. Is there a plugin? Have you guys had experience? So do some of that due diligence yourself. And then I think being able to sort of have that compelling argument of leadership is going to invest in something if it serves a purpose, which is efficiency, keeping people happy. So we've talked a lot about burnout. If there's a gift that you can give to hiring managers or recruiters or schedulers or whoever it is, as a way to say, look, we're making life easier for you by investing in this. Yes, you have to learn this technology and use it, but this is how it's going to allow you to focus on what you do well. I mean, look, we're an outsourcer. People hire us to outsource their recruiting. We do their employer branding. We do different elements. It's not that someone can't do this themselves. They don't have the time. They don't have the expertise. And let them do what they really want to do. If someone is a very passionate head of talent acquisition, they don't need to be sitting in focus groups talking to candidates about, So it's not giving up if you're using a partner or you're using technology. It's being smart about how do I get to what I need to quickly, efficiently, and effectively. And we talked a little bit about sort of hiring managers and sort of the bad behavior, which I want to address a minute. I'll know the person when I see it, or I don't know if that's the right type of, I know I told you to look for this type of candidate, but it's not really what I want. One of the best ways to get hiring managers to pay more attention is when they actually need to pay for it. So if you are bringing on a team, if you're hiring a contract recruiter, if you're using an RPO, I do find I get better behavior because someone in that business is invested. And if you're investing in something, you can say, listen, we're going to help you with this, but I need to talk to not just the TA lead. I need to talk to the divisional head about what are they passionate about? Why should someone come? Like Liana was saying, what are those sort of soft skills? And is it just the fact that you need someone who's comfortable in an entrepreneurial culture and that they can learn on the go and that they aren't going to come somewhere and expect to have 3 levels of admins? That information you do not get from a job description. You don't get from a system. You get from a conversation. And the more that you can bring in those people who are going to be then back you when you have the non-traditional candidate. Maybe you have someone who's a veteran and their resume is not going to fit what the keywords and the requirements are, but they've actually done that operational leadership role and they have the right passionate personality. So those are a couple of quick ways I would say that I've seen organizations, big and small, be able to get some effective change. And then your proof is in the pudding. Invest X amount of money on this period of time, 3 months, 6 months. If it doesn't work, then you've tried it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that idea of iterating, try something and see if it's going to work. I mean, I think to the extent, to your point, Jody, that the tool gives you structure, it'll help to hold folks accountable to how they're evaluating candidates. So again, with that first touch tool, there's no way that computers can replace what human recruiters do. It's not possible. There's so many comical examples of folks trying to do that and having it go horribly wrong. The classic one I always tell is of, Amazon was trying to build this resume screening tool. They were very proud of it. And it ended up just discriminating horrifically against women because every time it was mentioned that they went to a women's school or the word woman came up in the resume was thrown out essentially because there were so many more men that were hired in the job and they were learning on a biased data set. Humans aren't good at working at scale, but machines aren't good at making deep dive decisions. So you really just need to figure out how to focus them collaboratively so that humans can do the things that are interesting and that are really complicated and messy that computers will just fail at. And so having the computer there or the artificial intelligence solution there, or the tool there to give the structure to the humans helps us leave as humans our biases at the door. Because as much as we'd love to all be evolved, better versions of ourselves, humans have biases hardwired in. That's how our brains work. It's very adaptive in a lot of ways. And in the talent management space, humans are no different. And especially if you've been a recruiter for, 10, 20 years, you know what you want and when you see it and so on and so forth. And so having a tool that helps hold everybody accountable and helps sort of systematize and standardize across interviews where you don't, to Kirsten's earlier point, you don't have to have everyone in the room for every round. It's not possible, where there's the ability to have candidates record video so folks don't all have to schedule a time where they can all be on the phone simultaneously. Things to leverage your time so that you're working smarter and not harder. And again, to Jody's point, escalating things to leadership around pain points, not around, I hate this ATS or I hate that ATS, but hey, this is a problem I'm having. I know it's affecting me. I know it's affecting 4 other recruiters. We're all having this same pain point with this solution. So we need to figure out a way to solve this pain point because it's preventing us from doing our best work.
I want to get to some of the questions in the chat. Also, for those of you that are vetting new technology, one of my favorite websites is g2.com. You can type in a company or a service or whatever, and it's going to tell you the reviews of that service, and it'll tell you alternatives to that service. If you're looking at a new ATS, or new texting, new automation, AI stuff, it's a really great website. This question was from a while back, and I apologize. It's for Kirsten. Jared asked, you mentioned looking at some of the top recruiters in an org who are hitting their KPIs to figure out what tools they're leveraging for success. What tools or technology have you seen top recruiters leverage to be more productive and have better communication with hiring teams?
Whew. Okay, that's a big question. So first and foremost, the top recruiters are using your ATS. because the top recruiters are also good at record keeping. And I'm not saying that they have everything on time, like right away, but they keep their trail and they keep their data in a place that they can easily get to it. And a lot of times that's the ATS. You don't want to be going from here to here to here to here to here to here when you're trying to make hires. You're trying to make them quickly. You're trying to make them efficiently. And in this market, when you don't want to lose them. So they are using your ATS. But you also want to look at what else they're doing to take up for the things that your ATS is not doing. I want to use an example. So I am contracting at a large company and they have an ATS, but it does not have a lot of the information that I need to do my job, meaning I have to go into other systems. I have to go into other tools to pull data, to pull information that is necessary for me to do my job. So and I am one of the, people who are making hires and making them well. But it's a matter of the information that I'm providing to people. So not only the tools, but the information and the stuff that I'm giving back to the hiring managers, the stuff that I'm giving back to the candidates, that's effective too. So it's keeping records and using them. And I'm going to be transparent again. A lot of recruiters are not sourcing right now. Mm-hmm. They don't have the bandwidth. Thank you to organizations who have dedicated sourcers who are pulling people in and building our pipelines. Thank you. Thank you, because we need your help. So right now, your recruiters who, again, are maybe disaggregated from your sourcers are not in those tools. They're not in Indeed. They're not in Monster. I don't know. Do people still use that? I don't even know if people still use Monster. Not to call them out. They're not using their LinkedIn recruiter seat. Sorry, they're not. Give it to the people who are using it. Let them do it, because we're just overloaded right now, and that may change. But I personally don't have the time, and a lot of the other recruiters I know, especially those who work in organizations that are very large, who have a large number of positions, who have a lot of people applying. It's just too much. It's too much to remain high tech and high touch. So that's hopefully that answered your question. I'm not sure who asked it. Who was that?
I want to pivot a little bit and talk about bias. Because we're talking about efficiency and streamlining and moving faster. And my fear is that I don't maybe not use the word cut corners, but as we start working at breakneck speed, we might see bias start to creep into that process and a lot, unconscious bias. We're not even doing it intentionally. So what are some ways that we can identify top candidates quickly and move in an efficient way, but without introducing bias into the decision making?
I'm gonna toss in a different perspective. I think that there's never been a better time for non-traditional candidates to actually get looked at. So although we have speed and we have sort of pressure to quickly move people through, I do feel like for everything that's happened in the last 2 years, good or bad, it has, and we haven't specifically talked about DEI initiatives, but that is coming from the top now. And it is very clear that hiring managers in some organizations need to stop and make sure they have enough qualified candidates coming from different backgrounds, different profiles. But also, I think it is the role of the recruiter to be able to be confident to say, hey, I am submitting this person. Before you say anything, I know that they have 7 of the 10 things that are most important, but here's what's great about them. We have never had someone come from this industry, and look at the thinking we're going to get. these are skills that you said are easy to transfer. Like actually, one of the biggest roles I'm seeing right now is that clients are using us to hire more HRBPs because HRBPs are becoming like unicorns because it's a hard job. And it's even harder when you're becoming, the COVID nurse and you're dealing with all these other situations. But being able to now have companies say, I don't care if they have healthcare experience. I don't care if they've worked in tech. I just need someone who's a people person, who's willing to show up and be in an office and be an HR business partner. That's a very different conversation than we would have had 2 years ago. And I think the market is forcing folks because most organizations are not getting overwhelmed with qualified applications. They might be getting applications, but it's the qualified applications. So I agree with what everyone's saying is like, you need to be sourcing, you need to be thinking differently, and you need to be confident to be able to present candidates. So we can stop that unconscious bias by ourselves taking a moment and really thinking about how someone presents that may not be what we traditionally know. I think recruiters will look for what's the easy way that someone's going to say, I love this person and close the rec. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy right now, but it is an opportunity for us to bring in different types of talent into the organization because people have to. There aren't enough qualified candidates that meet exactly the requirement that people want.
I do think that there's some onus on the recruiter, a good deal. In the beginning, up front, the recruiter has to be educated on the role. They have to know what it is, and they have to ask the right questions. Because as much as we do these intake calls, like we're not asking the right questions in them. You can't have a script for every single thing. You have to get to what this person really needs, and have that up front. Say, hey, how do you feel about taking someone that's not already in Silicon Valley, because you're going to open yourself up to, X, Y, and Z. You have companies who want to bring all of their employees back into buildings when the jobs have been being done for 2.5, 3 years exclusively outside of buildings. I get it. A lot of people do want to work in a building, but there are also a lot of qualified job seekers who are not in a commutable distance, or who don't have the funds available to commute to that location, and you're missing out on them, or you're excluding them up front when they could do the job from somewhere else, or just come, 1 day a week, or just come a few times a month, just come a few times a year. I've worked for companies as a consultant where, they were in drive, but I was like, oh, I've been there twice, and it wasn't, and I didn't feel disconnected. I still built relationships, but did I actually need to be there to be a recruiter? No, I did not. So get the information up front, and that eliminates some of the bias, and be able to speak up. And if you feel like you can't speak up to the hiring manager because they're the ones that are, injecting this bias, and we have that a lot. There's a way to say things, and there's a way to coach. We're collaborators, so we have to be able to do that. If you don't feel comfortable, reach out to someone that you do trust. Reach out to your manager. Reach out to your next level manager and say, hi, there's some words that are being shared, that are being said with candidates that are not the most appropriate. When that job description goes up, don't post it if it's filled with gendered language. Like, don't do that. Don't post it if it says mandatory, required, 7 to 10 years experience. What are you talking about? Like, do you want 10 years experience? Do you want 7? Yeah.
And do you really need either of those? Right. What happens if someone only has 4 and they're great at it? Why 7?
Right. It's that languaging. Like, I saw something the other day about somebody being overqualified, and they equated that to age discrimination. They're like, oh, when you say that someone's overqualified, you're discriminating against people who are older. And I'm like, that's not necessarily true, because you can have years of work experience in something that does not translate to that role. Like, I'm a recruiter with 22 years experience. I'm not going to go be the CEO or the chief data scientist that requires 10 years of experience. That's not what that means. Conversely, someone with 2 years of experience in say digital marketing, for example, who is 23 is more qualified than the person who is my age, 25, who has never done digital marketing but has 5 years of work experience. So don't, like, we have to be aware of the words that we're using, and recruiters have to be a little bit more assertive and a little bit more bold, because you're wasting your time, and your time is precious. You know, when you keep going through these situations with it's always the same ones too, you know, that let me see one more person. Let me see one more person. Let me see one person. And they do what I call the hey big head, and they wait, they have someone come through the whole situation, and they ghost for a month, 2 months, a couple of weeks even. And today, a couple of days is too much, you know? And then they're like, hey, what happened to Charles Drew? What, you know, are they ready to be hired? Charles Drew interviewed for 4 other roles in this company, and they're gone. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I think just to build on something, Kirsten, that you called out earlier, and something that Jody called out. Kirsten, you mentioned that you need to ask the right questions. And Jody, you were talking about being able to advocate for maybe the more non-traditional candidates that you want. And I think both of those things are why it's so important to choose the right tech solutions and the right technologies that you're implementing in your talent management process that will help you ask the right questions and will help give you the information to advocate for those more non-traditional hires. Again, when you're talking about bias, like Josh is saying, you really want to stay as objective as possible for how you're evaluating them. Because if you're not evaluating them this more traditional, quote unquote, way of looking for keywords or years of experience with hard skills or something like that, you don't want to get into the pattern where you just have a good feeling, or you just like them, or they seem like the last person you hired, because that does introduce bias. That's how you hire 12 people that all look the same or think the same or bring the same sort of skill set. And whereas one might have been successful, a team of 12 folks who come from the exact same background and bring the exact same thing to the table, so to speak, it's not necessarily the strongest team of 12 you can build. Some of that diversity, not just diversity in terms of what their skin color is or what their gender is, but diversity in the most basic sense, what their background is, what industry they come from, how old they are, whether they have kids or not, whether they, you know, have a higher education degree or not. Diversity in every possible way you can measure it is what builds strong and dynamic teams. And I think when you're talking about from a tech solution, from an AI tech solution perspective, it's critical that that AI that you're implementing, or whatever automated processes you're implementing, are ethical, that they've been vetted by whatever scientists exist on the team, and that those scientists can explain to you in clear, articulate English language how it is that they made very sure, whatever politically correct word you'd like to use for that, that there is no bias in their process. Because artificial intelligence, machine learning, automated solutions have the capability to do tremendous amounts of harm to your organization. And I'm obviously an evangelist for AI technology. I'm a firm believer in the power of an automated solution to help recruiters work effectively and efficiently and at scale. But if you put a solution in where the scientists on staff have not vetted it appropriately for biased data and for introducing bias into your process, not only could you be opening yourself up to a lawsuit, but you're just going to be hiring the wrong people, and you're going to be missing these amazing candidates. So Josh, my answer to sort of ensuring that bias doesn't happen in your hiring process, you want to stay objective, you want to standardize, you want to use AI in an ethical way to output a structure to let your recruiters go to work and do deep dives on the folks that are most promising And again, you want to rely on things like soft skills as a first touch because they are an equalizer. Everyone has equal chance to develop soft skills. That's not necessarily the case for some of these technologies or access to higher education or things like that. And again, you're missing folks that might have been fantastic for your organization, who might stay for decades with you because of something silly like they only had 4 years of experience at such and such, and so they didn't even apply.
We're almost out of time, but I want to see if we can kind of address this next thing that I want to talk about, because we're talking about bias, and I think we're talking about efficiency, and I think bias and efficiency are directly related to these job descriptions, right? This bias can leak into the job descriptions. I think bias comes into play when the team is not very clear about what they want. And so I think these roles need to be defined on what does success look like in the role. So it's not what does the person look like or where do they come from? What do you need done in the first 90 days? What do you need done in the first 180 days? What do you need done in the first year? And if you can define that, then you can rate people based on their capabilities related to what you need done. What are your thoughts on job descriptions and kind of tying this all together with clarity and efficiency and all of that stuff?
I think really quickly, all I would add on is what do they need to know before they get there, and what can you teach? Because yeah, there's stuff they need to get done 90 days, 180 days, 1 year out, whatever it is. But there are things that you can teach them. If they've never used Workday, you can teach them how to use Workday. That's not a make or break skill for them, right? What is it that they have to know before they get in the door because it's too hard, too expensive, too time consuming, too risky to try to upskill them on it? And what can you commit to upskilling them on as an organization?
Agreed. And I think that messaging is part of it, right? So it's who wants to hire someone with terrible communication skills? So be mindful of what needs to be in that very succinct job description and put your time and effort into what goes around it, which is the environment. We are looking for people that are passionate about this. This is our mission and our goal. We work hard, play hard, whatever it is about it, and don't just make it up, test it, and actually do the proper research. But that's going to be equally important. If people are looking at 3 or 4 job descriptions and they're all the same and they're getting hit up by recruiters, especially if we look at those, I'm going to guess everyone on this call is looking for project managers, HRBPs, data analytics. Like we know the roles that people need. What's going to be different besides the bullets? It's going to be a little bit about the organization. And can I see myself there? As well as, am I meeting the sort of minimum requirements? So I think that's, those are the two sides of the coin. This is what you need. This is what we expect of you. This is what you can learn. And this is who we are. Does this sound like somewhere you want to be?
Yeah.
Leanna, I love that you mentioned upskilling and what can you teach. If you can hear my voice, please invest in your team. Be willing to train people. The teams that are winning are the ones that are identifying folks. I know a guy that over at Amazon, they were pulling people out of warehouses and training them to be sourcers and recruiters and all these things. And those folks have moved on and now they're recruiting for other tech companies. And they were not stocking. They were in fulfillment before that, but they were identified as an up and comer and they got trained. And so there's a talent gap. And so so
get some technology that'll help you do that, whether it's us or somebody else. Get some sort of automated tool that is going to help you find those folks, because there's only so much that you can do as human recruiters. There's not enough hours in your day.
Kirsten, closing thoughts. I know I cut you off.
No, so thank you both. And I just want to piggyback on what Jody said. Your job descriptions are too long. No one cares. And there's a difference between a job posting and that compensation document that you're copying and pasting and putting will do, be responsible for, and adding your words to it, your little zhuzh, and adding 5 more bullets to something that is just a baseline and a guide for how you're supposed to do that. So yes, please don't do that. I think of it the same way I think about resumes. If the same way that you judge candidates' resumes, candidates judge your job descriptions. And if you wouldn't apply for that job, guess what? They're not going to either.
True. Oh gosh. Okay. Leanna, Jody, Kirsten, thank you so much for being here. Cangrade, thank you so much for making this webinar possible. We couldn't do it without you. And everybody in the audience, thank you for tuning in. It gives us purpose. It gives us meaning, and we're glad that you're here. If you want to get involved with some of our content, please reach out to me, whether you've got topics that you'd like to see, or if you want to see your lovely face up here on the screen and contribute your voice, would be willing to talk to you about that as well. You're going to receive an email tomorrow with a link to today's recording. And so please feel free to share that out to your friends and colleagues. Once again, thank you to this wonderful panel for being here. Until next time.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Jody.